Everyone laughed at the cleaning lady until her son showed up to pick her up in a Ferrari. Mary Johnson Williams was on the 5th floor of the Golden Star corporate building in New York City when she felt the hot liquid run down her right hand. The coffee had splashed directly onto her yellow glove, leaving a dark stain that contrasted with the light blue uniform she had been wearing for almost 3 years. 3 elegant women were passing through the hallway at that moment, and Brittany Thompson, the marketing coordinator, still held the empty cup with a smile on her face. Beside her, Ashley Roberts and Emma Wilson chuckled softly as they watched Mary Johnson crouch to clean the marble floor she had just waxed. "Oops, it was an accident," said Brittany, but her tone of voice showed not a hint of regret. Mary Johnson looked up for a second, meeting the gaze of the 3 young women. They must have been around 30, wore expensive clothes and carried bags that cost more than she earned in 6 months of work. She said nothing, just nodded and went back to scrubbing the floor. "Wow, so dedicated," commented Ashley, pretending admiration. She didn't even look up properly to respond. "That's how it is. Simple folks usually don't have the manners to chat," added Emma, adjusting her blonde hair. Mary Johnson felt the heat rise in her cheeks, but she kept working. She needed that job. At 58, it wasn't easy to find another opportunity, and she still had 2 years left before she could retire. She lived in a small boarding house in the Queens neighborhood, shared the bathroom with 5 other people, and paid rent that consumed almost half of her salary. The 3 executives walked away, but their laughter echoed through the hallway. Mary Johnson finished cleaning and put the cloth in the bucket. Her hands constantly ached from the chemicals, but the yellow gloves helped protect skin already marked by years of hard work. Brittany Thompson was the daughter of business owners and had gotten the coordinator position right after graduating. At 32, she drove an imported car and lived in a luxurious apartment in the Upper East Side. To her, people like Mary Johnson were just part of the office scenery, invisible and disposable. Ashley Roberts, 30 years old, had a degree in business administration and dreamed of becoming a director before 35. She came from an upper-middle-class family in Boston and saw working in the capital as a springboard to achieve the success she had always wanted. She had no patience for people she considered slow or unambitious. Emma Wilson was the youngest of the group at 29. She had moved from Washington, D.C. to work at the company and was still adjusting to the competitiveness of the New York City market. She followed the other 2 because she wanted to be accepted and be part of the social circle they represented. At the end of the workday, Mary Johnson went down to the basement where the cleaning supply storage was. It was a small, stuffy place, with shelves full of products and a small sink where she washed the cloths and buckets. There, finally alone, she let a few tears run down her face. She remembered when she had arrived in New York City, over 20 years ago, carrying only a small suitcase and many dreams. She came from the countryside of Kentucky, from a town called Lexington, where she had lost her job at a candy factory. She arrived in the capital city 5 months pregnant, without the baby's father and without knowing anyone. The beginning was very difficult. She slept in shelters, worked as a street vendor, washed dishes in restaurants and cleaned houses. When the baby was born, a boy she named Michael, she had to work even harder to support them both. Often she spent the whole night cleaning offices so she could be with him during the day. Michael had always been an intelligent and curious child. Even under the most difficult circumstances, he excelled in school and asked questions that made Mary Johnson Williams proud, even when she didn't know the answers. He grew up watching his mother leave at dawn and return late at night, always tired, always struggling. When Michael turned 18, he got a scholarship to a private university. Mary Johnson worked 3 different jobs to help with expenses the scholarship didn't cover. She sold sandwiches on the morning train, did cleaning in the afternoon, and worked as a night watchman on weekends. During the 4 years of college, Mary Johnson barely slept. Her hands were permanently marked by cleaning products, her back constantly ached, and she developed varicose veins in her legs from standing so many hours. But seeing Michael graduate was the happiest moment of her life. After graduation, Michael got a job at a technology company. He started as an intern but quickly stood out. Within a few months, he was hired full-time and then promoted. Mary Johnson felt proud when he talked about his work, even though she didn't quite understand what he did. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. Over time, Michael stopped talking so much about work. He said he was fine, that things were going well, but didn't go into details. Mary Johnson respected her son's space and remained focused on her own daily challenges. The job at the Golden Star building was the best she'd ever had. The pay was a bit better than previous jobs. She had a signed contract and some basic benefits. But the constant humiliation from the three executives was becoming increasingly difficult to bear. The week after the coffee incident, the teasing intensified. Brittany started deliberately leaving papers scattered on the floor after Mary Johnson cleaned. Ashley would forget food scraps on the meeting table and make comments about the inefficiency of the cleaning when Mary Johnson came to collect them. Emma was the one who bothered her the most, because sometimes she seemed genuinely remorseful, but never had the courage to stand up to the other two. There were moments when Mary Johnson caught Emma looking at her with an almost guilty expression, but the next minute she'd join in the teasing again. One day, Mary Johnson arrived early to work and heard conversations coming from the women's restroom. She recognized the three executives' voices and unintentionally ended up hearing their conversation. "Did you see the video Jessica posted in the group?" said Brittany's voice. "What video?" asked Ashley. "The one of the cleaning lady kneeling to clean the floor. Jessica wrote, 'The pathetic old woman doing what she knows how to do.' The video already has over 50 likes. Mary Johnson felt her heart race. Had they filmed the moment she cleaned up the coffee and posted it in a group for others to see and laugh at her? "Guys, I think this is kind of harsh," said Emma, her voice hesitant. "Oh, come on, Emma, it's just a joke. Besides, she won't even see it, right? People like that don't even use social media properly," replied Brittany. "It's true, and at least now she knows her place here," added Ashley. Mary Johnson quietly left the area and went to the storage room. Her hands trembled as she tried to organize the cleaning supplies. The humiliation was even greater than she had imagined. It wasn't enough to be treated badly in person. Now there was a digital record of her humiliation being shared as entertainment. That night, in the boarding house, Mary Johnson looked at the small cracked mirror in her room. She saw a 58-year-old woman with graying hair tied in a simple bun, rough hands, and tired eyes. Sometimes she wondered what had happened to the dreams of the young woman who had arrived in New York City so many years ago. She thought about calling Michael, as she did every week, but decided not to. She didn't want to worry him with her problems. He had built a new and better life, and she was proud of that. Her sacrifices had been worth it, even if she was still struggling to survive. The next day, the three executives seemed especially excited. Brittany arrived with a different smile. Ashley was more talkative than usual. And Emma, although still seeming uncomfortable, participated more actively in conversations. During lunch, Mary Johnson was eating her simple, packed meal, sitting on a bench outside the building when the three approached. They carried trays with food from the expensive restaurant located on the ground floor of the building. "Wow, Mary Johnson," said Brittany, pretending surprise. "What a simple meal." Mary Johnson looked at her lunchbox containing rice, beans, a small piece of chicken, and a lettuce salad. It was what she could prepare with the basic ingredients she bought at the market. "We were thinking, do you live far from here?" asked Ashley, sitting beside her uninvited. "In Queens," replied Mary Johnson, without looking up from her food. "Wow, that's far. What time do you have to wake up to get here?" continued Ashley. 5 in the morning. 5 in the morning, exclaimed Emma. "I can't even function before 8. It must be tough, huh? Waking up so early, coming from so far to earn... How much do you make again?" asked Brittany with false concern. Mary Johnson didn't answer. She knew the question wasn't asked out of genuine interest, but to humiliate her further. She finished eating quickly and stood up to return to work. "Oh, don't be mad at us," said Brittany. "We're just trying to understand your situation better." That afternoon, Mary Johnson discovered her salary would be cut. The administrative manager, Susan Miller, called her for a talk at the end of the workday. Susan was a 45-year-old woman, always very serious and direct. "Mary Johnson, unfortunately we need to make some budget adjustments," explained Susan, avoiding looking directly at her. "Nothing personal, but we need to cut costs in all areas." "How much will the cut be, Ma'am?" asked Mary Johnson, feeling a tightness in her chest. "We'll reduce it by 20%. But in return, if you want to work some overtime cleaning the upper floors, you can make up the difference." 20% of her already small salary meant she would have even greater difficulty paying rent and food. Overtime was her only option, even though she knew it meant working even more hours per day. "I accept the overtime," said Mary Johnson. "Great. You can start tomorrow. The normal shift ends at 5, but you can stay until 10 at night cleaning the upper floors. Mr. James, the night security guard, will be here to accompany you." James Harris was the building's night security guard, a 62-year-old black man who always treated Mary Johnson with respect. He had worked there for 15 years and knew all the employees. He was a widower, father of 3 married daughters, and spent his nights reading books when there wasn't much activity. In the first days working overtime, Mary Johnson discovered that the upper floors were much larger and more luxurious than the lower ones. There were huge offices with expensive furniture, meeting rooms with glass tables and leather armchairs, and a boardroom that looked like a palace. Mr. James always accompanied her through the floors, carrying the heavy bucket when she needed to climb stairs. He was one of the few people in the building who genuinely talked to her, asking about her health, making comments about the weather, sharing stories about his family. "Mrs. Mary Johnson, you shouldn't be working so many hours," Mr. James would say. "You're at an age where you need to rest. I need the money, Mr. James, and I only have 2 years left until I can retire." "I understand, but you're getting very tired. Just yesterday I saw your hands shaking when you picked up the bucket." It was true. Mary Johnson's hands trembled constantly now, and she had back pain that sometimes left her unable to stand up straight, but she couldn't stop. During one of those extra work nights, Mary Johnson heard voices coming from the director's office. The door was slightly open, and she managed to overhear the conversation between Susan and someone on the phone. "Yes, I understand we need to maintain a better company image," Susan was saying. "The marketing girls complained that the cleaning lady has been too, how did they put it, sloppy lately." Mary Johnson stopped cleaning to pay attention. "I know she's a long-time employee, but maybe it's time we think about a replacement, someone younger, more presentable," Susan continued. Mary Johnson's heart raced. Were they planning to fire her? After 3 years working there, always punctual, always dedicated? "I'll talk to her tomorrow. Maybe we can find a way to, how to say, ease the transition," Susan concluded, before hanging up. Mary Johnson finished cleaning that night in a state of shock. Mr. James noticed something was wrong and asked if she was feeling well, but she just said she was tired. At the boarding house in the early hours of the morning, Mary Johnson couldn't sleep. Lying in the narrow bed, staring at the peeling ceiling of the small room, she thought about all the possibilities. If she lost that job, how would she pay the rent? How would she survive until she found another job? She thought about calling Michael, but it was 2 in the morning and she didn't want to scare him. Besides, what could he do? He had his own life, his own commitments. It wasn't fair to burden him with her problems. The next morning, Mary Johnson arrived at work earlier than usual. She wanted to show even more dedication, hoping Susan would change her mind. She started cleaning the ground floor with even more care than usual, leaving every surface shining. Brittany arrived around 9 in the morning, as always making a lot of noise with her high heels on the marble floor. When she saw Mary Johnson cleaning the windows in the entrance hall, she made a point of passing very close to her. "Good morning, Mary Johnson," she said in an overly sweet tone. "Did you sleep well?" Mary Johnson just nodded without stopping her work. "Oh, I imagine it must be hard to sleep well in that little place where you live, right?" Brittany continued. "Ashley drove by Queens yesterday and mentioned it's a very lively neighborhood." Ashley had gone to Queens just to see where Mary Johnson lived. The invasion of privacy was even more humiliating than the daily teasing. "But anyway, at least you have a place to live, right? There are plenty of people out there who don't even have that," Brittany concluded before getting into the elevator. During lunch, Mary Johnson learned more details about Ashley's visit to her neighborhood. Some employees commented that she had taken pictures of the boarding house and shown them to her colleagues, making remarks about the conditions of the place. The humiliation was constant now. It wasn't enough to be mistreated at work. Now her private life had become a joke. Mary Johnson started avoiding the places where the three executives usually hung out, trying to become even more invisible than she already was. But the situation worsened when Emma, apparently overcome by a moment of guilt, tried to approach her one afternoon. "Mary Johnson," called Emma, as Mary Johnson passed through the hallway carrying the bucket. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" Mary Johnson stopped, surprised. It was the first time one of the three had tried to have an individual conversation with her. "Look, I know sometimes the girls, we can be a bit—" Emma hesitated, searching for the words. "I just wanted to say it's nothing personal, you know?" "I understand, miss. It's just that actually we work in a very competitive environment, and sometimes the pressure, well, sometimes we end up taking it out on the wrong people," continued Emma, clearly uncomfortable. Mary Johnson just listened, not knowing how to respond. "I just wanted you to know that I have nothing against you. You seem like a good, hard-working person," said Emma. "Thank you, miss." "Yeah, well, that was all," finished Emma, before quickly walking away. A few hours later, Mary Johnson heard Brittany and Ashley talking about Emma's attempt at kindness. "Emma is getting too sentimental," said Brittany. "Soon she'll want to adopt the cleaner." "True. She needs to understand that too much friendliness gets you nowhere in this environment," replied Ashley. "We can't afford to be friends with everyone." "Especially with people who add nothing to our career," added Brittany. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. The following week, Mary Johnson was called to a meeting with Susan. The meeting was scheduled for 5 in the evening, at the end of the workday. Mary Johnson spent the whole day nervous, imagining what Susan would say. Susan's office was small but organized, with a dark wooden desk, 2 chairs, and some plants. Susan was sitting behind the desk, with an open folder in front of her, when Mary Johnson entered. "Sit down, Mary Johnson," said Susan, pointing to the chair in front of the desk. "I want to talk to you about a few matters." Mary Johnson sat on the edge of the chair, with her hands clasped in her lap. "Look, Mary Johnson, you are a dedicated employee, I acknowledge that," began Susan, "but I've been receiving some complaints about your work." "Complaints, ma'am?" "Yes. Some employees commented that the cleaning is no longer up to the standard it used to be, and there were also comments about, how to say it, your personal presentation." Mary Johnson looked at her blue uniform, which was clean but faded from time. Her yellow gloves were worn but still functional. She always tried to maintain a dignified appearance, within her limitations. "I always do my job to the best of my ability, ma'am," said Mary Johnson. "I know you try, but maybe it's time to think about some changes," continued Susan. "The company is going through a phase of image renewal, and we need all employees to be aligned with the new standards." "What are you saying, ma'am?" "I'm saying that perhaps you should consider other opportunities. I have contacts at other companies that might be interested in your services," explained Susan, trying to sound kind. Mary Johnson felt as if the world was collapsing around her. They wanted to get rid of her, and the complaints from the 3 executives were just the excuse they were using. "Please, ma'am, I need this job," said Mary Johnson, feeling her voice tremble. "I've worked here for 3 years, never missed a day, never been late. I only have 2 years left until I can retire." "I understand your situation, Mary Johnson, but I need to think about what's best for the company," replied Susan. "I'll give you 2 weeks to think about what we discussed. It's not an immediate dismissal, but it's a strong suggestion." Mary Johnson Williams left Susan's office with trembling legs. 2 weeks to think, but it was clear she had no real choice. If she didn't leave voluntarily, she would be fired anyway. That night, during overtime, Mr. James noticed that Mary Johnson was particularly downcast. "Miss Mary Johnson, you're very quiet today. Did something happen?" Mary Johnson told Mr. James about the conversation with Susan, about the executive's complaints and the suggestion to look for another job. "That's an injustice, Miss Mary Johnson," said Mr. James, shaking his head. "You're the most dedicated employee I've ever seen here. You work harder than 3 people combined." "But what can I do, Mr. James? If they want me gone, they'll find a way to fire me anyway. Have you thought about talking to someone in management or contacting the union?" "Who's going to believe a cleaner's word against 3 college-educated executives?" sighed Mary Johnson. "And the union? I don't even know how those things work." Mr. James was thoughtful for a few moments. "You know, Ms. Mary Johnson, I have a friend who works in the legal department of a big company. Maybe he can give some guidance about your rights." "Thank you, Mr. James, but I think it's better not to complicate things. Maybe it's really time to look for another place." "You shouldn't give up so easily. What happened to you here isn't right." That early morning at the boarding house, Mary Johnson made a decision. She would call Michael the next day and tell him about the situation. Maybe he could help her find another job, or at least give some advice on how to proceed. Michael always called her on Sundays, but this time she couldn't wait. It was Thursday and she needed to talk to him before her situation became even more complicated. On Friday morning during the lunch break, Mary Johnson went to a public phone near the building and dialed Michael's cell phone number. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Hello, Mom. How are you?" "Hi, son. Sorry to call at a different time, but I needed to talk to you." "Of course, Mom. Did something happen? Are you okay?" Mary Johnson hesitated. She didn't want to worry Michael, but she needed help. "Son, I'm having some problems at work. I think they're going to fire me." "What do you mean, Mom? What happened?" Mary Johnson told Michael the whole situation, from the humiliations by the 3 executives to the conversation with Susan. Michael listened in silence, only asking a few questions to clarify details. "Mom, that's workplace harassment. You can't accept being treated like that," said Michael, his voice firm. "But what can I do, son? I need the job." "Here's what you're going to do. Don't accept leaving voluntarily. If they want to fire you, let them do it officially. And I'll see if I can help in some way." "How can you help, son?" "Leave it to me, Mom. I'll figure it out. You just need to hold on a few more days." "But Michael..." "Mom, trust me. Don't accept any voluntary resignation offer. Don't sign anything. And keep doing your job as usual. I'll take care of it." Mary Johnson ended the call feeling a little better, but still worried. Michael seemed confident, but she didn't understand how he could help her. He had a good job, but not enough influence to interfere in a company like Golden Star. The following Monday, the 3 executives seemed particularly cheerful. They were chatting in small groups, laughing a lot, and making comments that Mary Johnson couldn't fully hear, but that certainly involved her. During the afternoon, Brittany approached Mary Johnson with a smile on her face. "Mary Johnson, we heard you'll be leaving us soon," said Brittany, feigning sadness. "What a shame. We were already used to having you here." Mary Johnson continued cleaning without responding. "Susan mentioned that you're thinking of seeking new horizons. I think it's very brave of you, at a more mature age, to step out of your comfort zone," Brittany continued. "It really is very brave," added Ashley, who had joined the conversation, "especially considering it probably isn't easy to find a job at your age." Mary Johnson stopped cleaning and looked directly at the 2 young women. "I'm not leaving here," she said, with a firmness in her voice that surprised even herself. "As long as I don't do anything wrong, I'll keep working here." Brittany and Ashley exchanged surprised glances. They hadn't expected Mary Johnson to respond so directly. "Wow, such determination," said Brittany with an ironic smile. "But sometimes determination isn't enough, right? Sometimes circumstances change, and we need to adapt." "That's true. Sometimes it's better to leave with dignity than to be forced out," Ashley added. Mary Johnson returned to work without responding, but their words echoed in her head. They were making it clear that her departure wasn't a choice, but a matter of time. On Wednesday of that week, Susan called Mary Johnson in for another talk. This time the meeting was scheduled for 4 in the afternoon, an hour before the normal end of the workday. "Mary Johnson, have you thought about what we discussed last week?" asked Susan as soon as Mary Johnson sat down. "Yes, ma'am, I have. And I've decided that I want to continue working here." Susan sighed and closed the folder on her desk. "Look, Mary Johnson, I tried to be delicate with you, but I'll be more direct now. We've received several complaints about your work and about Your behavior toward other employees. My behavior, Mum? Yes. Employees have reported that you're sometimes rude, that you don't respond when greeted, that you have a hostile attitude. Mary Johnson was shocked. She always tried to be polite to everyone, even when she was mistreated. With all due respect, ma'am, that's not true. I always treat everyone with courtesy. I have reports saying otherwise, insisted Susan, opening the folder again. And besides, there was an incident yesterday where you were supposedly rude to Brittany when she tried to greet you. I wasn't rude to anyone, ma'am. Mary Johnson, I don't want to make this more difficult than it needs to be. I'm offering you the chance to leave with dignity, receiving all your severance pay. If you don't accept, I'll be forced to start a disciplinary process that could result in termination for cause. The threat was clear. Mary Johnson felt she was being backed into a corner with no way out. Can I have until Friday to decide? Asked Mary Johnson. You may, but on Friday I'll need a definitive answer. Mary Johnson left the meeting feeling defeated. The false accusations about her behavior were the last straw. They were willing to lie to get rid of her. That night, during overtime, Mary Johnson told Mr. James about the new conversation with Susan. Mrs. Mary Johnson, that's absurd. I've worked here for 15 years and I've never seen you be rude to anyone. On the contrary, you're one of the most polite people I know. But their word carries more weight than mine, Mr. James. Have you spoken with your son about this new threat? I'll call him tomorrow, but I think it's time to accept that we've lost this battle. Don't say that, Mrs. Mary Johnson. Sometimes things change when we least expect it. On Thursday, Mary Johnson called Michael again and told him about the new accusations and Susan's ultimatum. Mum, don't accept anything. Don't sign any papers. Don't agree to any voluntary resignation, said Michael, his voice even firmer than in their previous conversation. But son, they're threatening to fire me for cause. If that happens, I won't get anything. Mum, trust me, I'll handle this situation. Just hold on until Friday. How are you going to handle it, Michael? This is a big company. They have lawyers. They have money. Mom, I know you're worried, but I have a plan. I just need you to hold on one more day. All right, son. I trust you. On Friday morning, Mary Johnson Williams arrived at work knowing it would be a decisive day. Susan had scheduled a meeting for 5 in the afternoon, and she would have to give a final answer. The 3 executives seemed especially happy that morning. They chatted animatedly and occasionally glanced in Mary Johnson's direction with smiles on their faces. Mary Johnson's last Friday here with us, commented Brittany, loud enough to be heard. We'll miss her. That's true. I wonder who will replace her, asked Ashley. I hope it's someone more suitable for the environment, replied Brittany. Mary Johnson tried to focus on her work, but it was hard to ignore the comments. She cleaned each floor with even more care than usual, perhaps because it really was the last time she would do that job. During lunch, she ate her packed meal on the same bench as always, watching the street activity. New York City remained as frenetic as ever, indifferent to the personal dramas of its inhabitants. She thought about all the jobs she'd had throughout her life, all the times she'd been forced to start over. At 3 in the afternoon, when Mary Johnson was cleaning the entrance hall, a red car stopped in front of the building. It was a Ferrari, a model she couldn't identify, but that clearly cost a fortune. The car caught the attention of several people passing by on the street. A young man got out of the car. He wore an impeccable grey suit, shiny leather shoes, and carried an executive briefcase. He had well-cut dark hair and appeared to be about 30 years old. Several employees in the hall stopped to watch. The young man entered the building and looked around, as if searching for someone. Brittany, Ashley, and Emma, who were returning from lunch at that moment, were clearly impressed by his appearance. "Excuse me," said the young man, addressing the receptionist. "I'm looking for Mary Johnson Williams. She works here." "Mary Johnson, the cleaning lady?" asked the surprised receptionist. "That's right." Brittany, who had overheard the conversation, approached. "Can I help you with something?" she asked with her best smile. "I'm Brittany Thompson, marketing coordinator." The young man glanced at her briefly, but showed no particular interest. "Thank you, but I need to speak specifically with Mary Johnson Williams." "She must be around cleaning somewhere, but perhaps I can help with some information," insisted Brittany. "Mary Johnson is over there," said the receptionist, pointing to the entrance hall where Mary Johnson continued cleaning, unaware of the conversation. The young man walked toward Mary Johnson, who only noticed his approach when he said, "Mum." Mary Johnson looked up from the floor and saw Michael standing before her. For a moment she couldn't process what she was seeing. Her son was there, in the building where she worked, wearing expensive clothes and arriving in a Ferrari. "Michael?" she murmured, her voice almost inaudible. "I came to get you, Mom," said Michael, extending his hand to help her up. The hall fell completely silent. Brittany, Ashley and Emma watched the scene with expressions of total shock. The receptionist had stopped answering phones, and other employees passing through the area stopped to watch. "But Michael, what are you doing here?" asked Mary Johnson, still confused. "I came to solve a problem, Mom, and I came to take you home." Susan Miller appeared at that moment, drawn by the unusual commotion in the hall. "What's going on here?" asked Susan. Michael turned to her. "Are you Susan Miller, the administrative manager?" "Yes, that's me. Who wants to know?" "My name is Michael Williams. I'm Mary Johnson's son, and I need to speak with you." Susan looked from Michael to Mary Johnson, clearly confused by the situation. "Talk about what?" "About the treatment my mother has been receiving at this company over the past few weeks." Brittany approached again, still trying to understand the situation. "Sorry, but are you really Mary Johnson's son?" she asked, disbelief in her voice. "Yes, I am. And you are?" "Brittany Thompson, marketing coordinator," she replied, extending her hand. Michael looked at the outstretched hand, but didn't shake it. "Brittany Thompson. That name sounds familiar." Brittany's expression changed slightly. There was something in Michael's tone that made her uncomfortable. Susan intervened. "Look, I don't know what the situation is, but if there's a problem, we can resolve it in my office." "Great," said Michael. "But before we speak privately, I'd like all the employees present to hear a few things." Mary Johnson held her son's arm. "Michael, please, you don't need to do this. Let's go." "No, Mom." "Yes, I do. These people need to know who you are." Michael looked around the hall, where there were now at least 20 employees watching. "My mother, Mary Johnson Williams, has worked at this company for 3 years. She is an honest, hard-working, and dedicated woman who has never missed a single day of work." He paused and continued. "Over the past few weeks, some people in this company decided to make her life a living hell. Daily humiliations, taunts, embarrassing videos shared in groups, threats of dismissal based on false accusations." Brittany, Ashley, and Emma were visibly getting nervous. "All of this," Michael continued, "was done to a 58-year-old woman who works 14 hours a day to survive with dignity." Susan tried to interrupt. "Look, young man, I don't know where you got this information, but I got this information from my mother, who told me about every humiliation she suffered here," Michael interrupted. "And from other sources as well." He looked directly at the 3 executives. "Do you think someone like my mother has no family, no one who cares about her? Do you think you can humiliate someone without consequences?" Emma took a step back, clearly frightened. "Look, we never did anything that bad." "Never did anything that bad," Michael repeated. "You deliberately spilled coffee on the floor she had just cleaned, filmed her cleaning, and posted it in groups with humiliating comments, went to the neighborhood where she lives to take pictures and make jokes, made false accusations about her behavior." Each accusation Michael made deepened the silence in the hall. The other employees looked at the 3 executives with expressions of disapproval. Susan tried to control the situation. "Look, if there really was some misunderstanding, we can talk and resolve." "Misunderstanding?" Michael laughed ironically. "Susan, you threatened to fire my mother for cause based on accusations you knew were false." "I didn't know anything about this," protested Susan. "Of course you did. You were pressured by these 3 to get rid of my mother because she didn't fit the new image you wanted for the company." Mary Johnson was getting increasingly nervous about the situation. "Michael, please, let's go. You don't need to make a scene." "Mom, you've worked your whole life. You woke up at 5 in the morning for years to support our family. She worked 3 jobs at the same time to put me through school. She never stole a penny from anyone, never harmed a soul. And these people thought they could walk all over her like she was trash." Michael's words echoed through the hall, and some employees began murmuring among themselves. Brittany tried to defend herself. "Look, if there was some misunderstanding, we can talk." "Misunderstanding," repeated Michael. "You filmed my mother on her knees on the floor and posted it with the caption, 'The pathetic old woman doing what she knows best.' That's a misunderstanding." Brittany turned pale. How did Michael know exactly what she had written? How do you know that?" "I know many things, Brittany. For example, I know you're Robert Thompson's daughter, who owns an advertising agency in Beverly Hills. I know you graduated from a very expensive private college that Daddy paid for. I know you've never worked a single day in your life before getting this job through a referral." Brittany was visibly shaken. How did that man know so many details about her life? Michael continued, "I also know that you, Ashley, owe $22,000 on your credit card and are living in an apartment you can't afford, and that you, Emma, failed the college entrance exam 3 times before getting into college through your father's lawsuit." The 3 executives were in a state of shock. How had Michael obtained this information? Susan intervened. "Look, young man, I don't know who you are or how you got this information, but this is going too far." Michael took a card from his pocket and handed it to Susan. "Michael Williams, CEO of Future Tech Solutions." Susan looked at the card and her eyes widened. Future Tech Solutions? The tech company? Exactly. And as of last Monday, the new owner of this building. The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved, no one even breathed. "Owner," repeated Susan, her voice trembling. "Yes, we bought the building from the previous management company through an acquisition that was finalized on Monday. We haven't announced it yet, because we wanted to evaluate how the companies occupying the space were operating." Michael looked around the hall. "And what an interesting evaluation we've made." Mary Johnson was completely lost. Her son owned the building where she worked. How was that possible? Brittany desperately tried to fix the situation. "Look, Michael, Mr. Williams, there was a terrible misunderstanding. I never meant to humiliate anyone." "Of course you did, Brittany. You 3 enjoyed humiliating my mother. It was your favorite pastime." Ashley was trembling. We didn't know she was your mother." "And that makes a difference?" asked Michael, his voice filled with indignation. "Do you think it's acceptable to humiliate someone just because they're not related to someone important?" Emma began to cry. "We're sorry, please, we didn't mean to. It was all without thinking." "Without thinking?" Michael laughed bitterly. "You planned the humiliations. You organized to make her life impossible. That wasn't without thinking." Susan tried to take some control of the situation. "Mr. Williams, if you're really the new owner, we can resolve this situation professionally." "Can you? And how exactly do you plan to resolve 3 years of humiliations?" "3 years?" asked Susan, confused. "Yes, Susan. You think this started now? My mother has been telling me for 3 years about the treatment she receives here. The humiliations, the comments, the way you treat her as if she's invisible." Michael looked at Mary Johnson with affection. "The difference is that now I'm in a position to do something about it." "Michael, how did you manage to buy this building?" asked Mary Johnson, still in shock. "It's a long story, Mom, but the important thing is that you don't have to go through this anymore." Susan was desperate. "Mr. Johnson, please, can we speak privately? I'm sure we can reach an agreement." "An agreement?" Michael laughed. "Susan, you threatened to fire my mother for cause based on lies. What kind of agreement do you think would be possible now?" Brittany tried once more. "Please, Mr. Johnson, we acknowledge we were wrong. We can apologize, make it up somehow." "Make it up?" Michael looked directly at her. "Brittany, you filmed my mother being humiliated and turned it into entertainment. How exactly do you plan to make up for that?" The lobby was now packed with employees. The news that there was a new building owner had spread quickly, and everyone wanted to see what was happening. Michael observed the crowd and continued, "Since Monday, my company has been evaluating all businesses occupying this building. We're deciding which lease contracts will be renewed and which will be cancelled." Susan turned pale as she understood the implications. Mr. Johnson, during this week we installed discrete security cameras on every floor to assess company operations. We have recordings of all employee interactions. Brittany, Ashley and Emma exchanged looks of total panic. We've recorded every humiliation, every provocation, every moment you three treated my mother like garbage. Michael took a tablet from his briefcase and showed it to everyone. We have you deliberately spilling coffee on the floor. We have you laughing and making humiliating comments. We have Susan pressuring my mother with threats based on lies. Susan desperately tried to justify herself. Mr. Johnson, I was just following company guidelines. What guidelines, Susan? What company guidelines instruct you to harass employees? What guidelines allow you to create false accusations? Michael put away the tablet and looked at the crowd of employees. But the evaluation didn't only record negative behaviors, it also recorded gestures of kindness and professionalism. He looked toward the entrance where Mr. James had appeared, drawn by the commotion. Mr. James Harris, please come here. Mr. James approached, clearly confused by the situation. Mr. James, you've worked in this building for 15 years, haven't you? Yes, sir. And you've always treated my mother with respect and dignity, even when others didn't. Mr. James looked at Mary Johnson and began to understand the situation. Mrs. Mary Johnson is a very good person, sir. She's always been respectful to everyone. Exactly. And for that reason, Mr. James, I'd like to offer you the position of head of security for the entire complex with your salary tripled. Mr. James was speechless. Sir, don't know what to say. You don't need to answer right now, but people who treat others with dignity deserve to be recognized. Michael turned his attention to the three executives, who were clearly in panic. Now, about you three. Brittany tried one last time. Mr. Johnson, please, we recognize our mistakes. We're sorry. Sorry for what exactly? For humiliating my mother? Or for finding out who I am? The question went unanswered. Because you had 3 years to show remorse, 3 years to treat my mother with basic respect, and you chose to do exactly the opposite. Michael looked at Susan. Susan, your company's lease is cancelled. You have 30 days to vacate the space. 30 days? Susan became desperate. Mr. Johnson, please, we're an established company. We have employees, commitments. You also had commitments to employee well-being. You chose to ignore those commitments. Michael turned to the three executives. As for you, you have until Monday to turn in your badges and clear your desks. But Mr. Johnson, protested Brittany, we can change. We can learn. Brittany, you had 3 years to learn. You preferred to use that time to humiliate a working woman. Emma was openly crying. Please, I need this job. I have bills to pay, commitments. Emma, you should have thought of that before taking part in the humiliation. Michael took Mary Johnson's hand. Mom, let's go. You never have to work again unless you want to. But Michael, I don't understand how did you manage all this? When did you become the owner of a company? I'll explain everything to you on the way, Mom. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. As they headed for the exit, Michael stopped and turned to the watching employees. To all the other employees who always treated my mother with respect, you will have job opportunities at my company, with better salaries and benefits. Talk to Mr. James for more information. On the sidewalk, next to the red Ferrari, Mary Johnson finally managed to ask the question that had been hammering in her head. Michael, explain to me what's going on. How did you get all this? Michael opened the passenger door for her. Mum, get in the car first. Let's go home and I'll tell you everything. What home, Michael? I live in a boarding house in Queens. Not anymore, Mom. You're going to live in a real house. During the drive through the streets of New York City, Michael began to explain his story. Mom, remember when I graduated and got that job at the technology company? I do. In the first few years I worked as a regular employee, but I always observed how the company worked, how decisions were made, what problems weren't being solved. Mary Johnson listened attentively. After 3 years, I started developing some tech solutions in my spare time, programs that could optimize processes, reduce costs, improve efficiency. And did that work out? It worked out better than I expected, Mum. I patented the solutions and started licensing them to other companies. First one, then two, then dozens. Michael stopped at a traffic light and looked at Mary Johnson. In 5 years, I was making more money from the program licenses than from my salary, so I left the company and founded Future Tech Solutions. And why did you never tell me any of this? Because I know you, Mum. I knew that if I told you I was doing well, you'd want to stop working, and I knew that working was important to you for your self-esteem to feel useful. Mary Johnson became thoughtful. It was true. If she had known Michael was doing well, she would have felt obliged to stop working, and that would have left her without purpose. But why didn't you say anything when I started being mistreated at work? Because every time I suggested you change jobs, you said everything was fine, that it was just jealousy from your co-workers, that it would pass. I didn't realize it was that serious. Michael stopped in front of a large house in an upscale neighborhood on the Upper West Side. It was only last week, when you called me desperate, that I understood I needed to act. And you bought the whole building just to protect me. Mom, I can afford to do that. And besides, it was a good investment. The building was being sold below market value. They entered the house, which was large and elegant, but cozy. There were new furnishings, but also some old pieces that Mary Johnson recognized. Michael, this house, it's yours, Mom. I bought it last week, and already transferred it to your name. Mary Johnson Williams sat on one of the living room sofas, still trying to process everything that had happened. Son, I don't know if I can accept all this. It's too grand for me. Michael sat beside her. Mom, you worked 30 years to give me the chance at a better life. Now it's my turn to give back. But I never asked for anything in return, Michael. I know, Mom, and that's exactly why you deserve all this and much more. Michael showed Mary the house. It had 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a large kitchen, a dining room, and a small backyard garden. Everything was tastefully and carefully furnished. Michael, this is too luxurious for me. I won't know how to live in a house like this. You'll get used to it, Mom. And the maid comes 3 times a week to help with cleaning and other tasks. A maid? Michael, I am a maid. How can I have a maid? Mom, you're nobody's maid anymore. You're my business partner. Partner? Yes, I put 40% of the company shares in your name. You're co-owner of Future Tech Solutions. Mary fell silent for several minutes, trying to absorb all the information. Michael, I don't understand anything about business, about technology. You don't need to understand, Mom. You just need to sign some papers occasionally and receive the dividends. Dividends? The company profits. Every month you'll receive an amount equivalent to about 20 salaries of the cleaning lady you were until today. Mary began to cry, but this time they weren't tears of sadness. Son, I don't know if I deserve all this. Michael hugged her. Mom, you deserve this, and much more. You sacrificed your entire life to give me opportunities. Now it's my turn to give opportunities to you. In the following days, the story spread quickly through the region. The company where the 3 executives worked was forced to close, as they couldn't find another suitable location in such a short time. Brittany, Ashley, and Emma became unemployed and had difficulty finding new jobs, as the story of how they treated Mary became known in the corporate world. Susan managed to get another job, but at a smaller company with a reduced salary. She tried several times to contact Michael to ask for a second chance, but never received a response. Mr. James accepted the promotion and became the most respected security chief in the business complex. He created a training program for new employees that included modules on respect and dignity in the workplace. Mary took a few months to get used to her new reality. At first, she would wake up at 5 in the morning out of habit and missed the movement and routine of work. Michael then suggested she get involved in volunteer activities. She began working at an organization that helped vulnerable working women. Twice a week, she would go to the organization and talk with women going through difficulties similar to what she had faced. It's strange, Mary commented to Michael during dinner at the new house. I spent my whole life working to clean other people's houses, and now I have someone who cleans mine. And how do you feel about that? Guilty sometimes, but also free. For the first time in my life, I can choose what to do with my time. Michael smiled. And what do you want to do? I want to help other women going through what I went through. I want them to know there's always hope, even when it seems there's no way out. Mary became a respected speaker at the organization. Her story of triumph inspired other working women not to give up on their dreams, even in the face of great adversity. 6 months after the events at the building, Emma sought out Mary Johnson at the organization. She was visibly distressed, wearing simple clothes and appearing to have lost a lot of weight. "Mrs. Johnson," said Emma, her voice trembling, "I know I have no right to be here, but I needed to speak with you." Mary Johnson received her in one of the organization's rooms. "You can speak, Emma. I wanted to apologize, truly, for what I did, for what we did to you." "And why are you apologizing now?" Emma began to cry. "Because now I know what it's like. After we lost our jobs, I got another job at a smaller company, and there they treat me the same way we treated you." Mary Johnson listened in silence. "I understand now how you felt, the humiliation, the feeling of being worthless, of being invisible. It's awful. And what have you learned from this?" "I learned that it doesn't matter what position a person holds, or how much they earn, or what their social class is. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity." Mary Johnson was thoughtful for a few moments. "Emma, are you sorry because you did something wrong, or because you're now going through the same thing I went through?" "At first, I was sorry only because I was going through the same thing. But now I understand that what we did was cruel, regardless of the consequences for us." "And what do you intend to do with this learning?" "I want to help. I don't know how, but I want to help people who are going through this. I want to try to make up in some way for the harm I did." Mary Johnson was surprised by Emma's sincerity. "Are you sure about this? It's not just a passing impulse of guilt." "I'm sure, Mrs. Johnson. I've changed. What happened to me made me see the world differently." Mary Johnson decided to give Emma a chance. "All right, if you really want to help, you can start as a volunteer here at the organization, but it will be real work, hard work, with no glamour at all." "I'll accept anything." Emma began working at the organization 3 times a week. At first, she only organized documents and helped with administrative tasks, but over time she began participating in conversations with the women served. Her experience of having gone from a successful executive to a humiliated, unemployed person gave credibility to her words when she spoke about overcoming and starting over. "It's funny," Mary Johnson commented to Michael after a few months. "Emma has really changed. She understood the lesson." "And the other 2? "Brittany and Ashley haven't shown up yet. Maybe they haven't learned anything, or maybe they don't have the courage to face what they did." "Some people need to lose much more to learn, Mom." 1 year after the events at the building, Michael organized a surprise birthday party for Mary Johnson. She was turning 59, and it would be her first birthday party in her own home. Michael had invited all the people who had been part of Mary Johnson's journey of overcoming. Mr. James, now a prosperous security chief, Emma, who had become a dedicated volunteer, several women Mary Johnson had helped at the organization, and some employees from Future Tech Solutions. "Mom," said Michael during the party, "a year ago you were being humiliated by people who thought they were superior. Today you are here surrounded by people who truly respect and admire you. Michael, you transformed my life. But do you know what's most important?" "What, Mom?" "You gave me back my dignity. For so many years I thought my worth was in the work I did, in the role I performed. I learned that my worth is in who I am as a person." The party was simple, but moving. Mary Johnson Williams received symbolic gifts. Mr. James gave her a new pair of yellow gloves to honor the old ones she used at work. Emma gave her a book about personal triumph. The women from the organization made a photo album with testimonials about how she had impacted their lives. But the most special gift came from Michael. "Mom, this is my last gift for you today." He handed her a folder with documents. "What is this, son?" "The deed to a plot of land in Queens, near the boarding house where you used to live." Mary Johnson looked at the documents without understanding. "What do I need land for, Michael?" "For you to build a support center for working women. a place where they can get legal guidance, professional training, psychological support, a place where no one is humiliated for working honestly. Mary Johnson was moved. "But Michael, this will cost a lot of money." "Mum, we have the money. What's rare is finding people with your heart to take care of a project like this. And will I be able to manage something like this? You'll have all the help you need. I've already hired architects, lawyers, social workers. You just need to be the soul of the project." 2 years later, the Mary Johnson Center was inaugurated. It was a 3-story building in the heart of Queens, offering free services for low-income working women. On the first floor, there was a legal guidance service where volunteer lawyers helped women who suffered moral harassment or other labor violations. On the second floor, there were professional training rooms where women could learn new skills and qualify for better jobs. On the third floor, there was a psychological support service with therapists who helped women regain their self-esteem and confidence. Mary Johnson worked at the center every day, but now as the general coordinator, not as an employee. She wore simple but elegant clothes and always carried a pair of yellow gloves with her as a reminder of where she had started. At the inauguration ceremony, hundreds of people attended. There were domestic workers, cleaners, saleswomen, seamstresses, and many other professionals who rarely received public recognition. Michael gave an emotional speech. "This center exists because my mother taught me that a person's worth isn't in the position they hold or the money they make. It's in the dignity with which they live and how they treat others." My mother spent decades being treated as invisible by society. Today, she is the most visible person in this community because she's finally occupying the place she always deserved. Mary Johnson also spoke at the ceremony. "For many years, I thought my destiny was to serve others in silence. Today, I understand that I can serve others, but with an active voice, with the power to transform. This center exists so that no working woman feels alone in her struggles, so that all know they have value regardless of the work they do." In the months following the inauguration, the center served hundreds of women. Many were able to resolve legal problems that had plagued them for years. Others found new jobs after the training courses. Several regained their self-esteem through psychological support. Emma became a permanent employee at the center, coordinating the training programs. Her personal transformation had made her an effective mentor for other women who needed to rebuild their lives. "Mrs. Mary Johnson," Emma said during a team meeting, "I wanted to thank you for giving me a second chance." "You deserved that chance, Emma. We all deserve the opportunity to learn from our mistakes. But I wanted to know, have you really forgiven me?" Mary Johnson became thoughtful. "Emma, forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about choosing not to let what happened define our relationship from now on. And you chose that. I chose to see who you've become, not who you were." 3 years after the center's opening, Michael received an unexpected invitation. A New York City university wanted to award Mary Johnson Williams an honorary doctorate degree recognizing her social work. "Mum, you deserve this honor." "But Michael, I didn't even finish high school. How can I receive a doctorate title?" "Because you have the kind of knowledge that isn't learned from books, Mum. You have life wisdom." At the degree conferral ceremony, Mary Johnson wore an elegant blue dress but carried her yellow gloves in her purse. The university auditorium was packed with students, professors, center workers, and local authorities. The university dean gave a speech about how Mary Johnson represented overcoming and social transformation. Mary Johnson Williams teaches us that true education isn't just in classrooms, but in the ability to transform suffering into solidarity, humiliation into humanity. When it was her turn to speak, Mary Johnson approached the podium with emotion. "When I was a child in Kentucky, my mother told me that work dignifies man. For many years, I believed that meant I had to accept any treatment, because at least I was working. Today I understand that work does dignify, but we also need to dignify work. We need to treat every profession, every worker, with the respect they deserve. I received this title not just for myself, but for all the women who wake up at dawn to clean the places where others work, for all who carry weight beyond their capacity to support their families, for all who are invisible, but keep the world running. Mary Johnson's speech was interrupted several times by emotional applause. At the end, she received a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. After the ceremony, during the cocktail hour, a young student approached Mary Johnson. "Mrs. Johnson, I wanted to thank you for your story. My mother is a cleaner, and I've always been ashamed of that. Today I understand I should be proud." "What's your mother's name?" "Rose. Rose Davis." "Tell Rose that an honorary doctorate sends a hug and a big thank you for the work she does." The student left with tears in her eyes, and Mary Johnson knew she had planted another seed of transformation. 5 years after the humiliation in the corporate building, Mary Johnson was sitting in her garden reading a book when the phone rang. "Mrs. Johnson," said a familiar voice on the other end. "Yes, who's speaking?" "It's Brittany Thompson." Mary Johnson was surprised. Brittany was the only one of the 3 executives who had never made contact after the events in the building. "Hi, Brittany." "Mrs. Johnson, I know I have no right to call you, but I wanted to apologize." "Okay, Brittany, I'm listening." "In the past 5 years, my life turned upside down. I lost my job, had to sell my car, moved back to my parents' house. I had depression, went through therapy." Mary Johnson listened in silence. "During therapy, I had to face what I did to you, and I understood that I was a horrible person. And now you're not anymore." "I'm trying not to be. I'm working as a salesperson in a clothing store. I earn little, but I'm trying to learn to treat all people with respect, regardless of their profession." "And why are you calling me, Brittany?" "Because I wanted to ask if there's any way I can make up for what I did, if I can help in some way at the center you created." Mary Johnson became thoughtful. "Brittany, why do you want to help?" "Because I learned that humiliating others didn't make me a better person. On the contrary, it made me worse. And now I want to try to be better. And what can you offer to the center? I know it's not much, but I understand marketing and communication. Maybe I can help promote your work, get more donations, more volunteers." Mary Johnson smiled. It was interesting how life turns around. "All right, Brittany, come talk to me next week. Let's see how you can help." "Really? You would give me this opportunity?" "Everyone deserves a second chance, Brittany. What matters is what we do with that chance." Brittany began working as a volunteer at the center, handling promotion and communication. She created social media campaigns that significantly increased the number of donations and volunteers. Working alongside hard-working women, Brittany learned to value types of intelligence she hadn't recognized before. Women who could barely read showed a practical wisdom she had never developed. "Mrs. Mary Johnson," said Brittany after a few months of volunteer work, "I wanted to thank you for giving me this opportunity. How do you feel working here?" "I feel useful for the first time in my life. Before, I thought I was important because I had a fancy position and wore expensive clothes. Now I know I'm important because I help other people." "And have you learned anything specific?" "I learned that intelligence comes in many forms. Mrs. Grace, who works in cleaning at the center, knows things about life that I'll never know. Mrs. Teresa, who sells sweets on the street, has a wisdom about relationships that no college teaches." Mary Johnson smiled, seeing Brittany's transformation. "And what do you plan to do from now on?" "I want to keep helping here, and I want to study social work. I want to get a degree so I can help more effectively." "Even earning much less than you did before?" "Mrs. Mary Johnson, I learned that money without purpose is empty. I'd rather earn little doing something that makes a difference in people's lives." On the 6th anniversary of the humiliation in the building, Mary Johnson organized a special event at the center. She called it Day of Dignity at Work. The event brought together workers from various professions: cleaners, saleswomen, seamstresses, caregivers, cooks. There were also business owners, students, politicians, and journalists. "We are here today," said Mary Johnson at the opening of the event, "to celebrate the value of all honest work, to remember that there are no more or less dignified professions, only people working to build a better society." The event included talks about labor rights, professional training workshops, and testimonies from women who had overcome situations of humiliation at work. Michael also spoke at the event. 6 years ago, my mother was humiliated by people who thought they were superior to her. Today, those same people would be in line to have the honor of working with her. This didn't happen because my mother changed. It happened because the world around her learned to recognize the value she always had. During the event, Emma and Brittany went on stage together to talk about personal transformation. "We both took part in the humiliation of Mrs. Mary Johnson," said Emma. "And today we're here to talk about how it's possible to change, how it's possible to learn to be a better person." "The hardest part," added Brittany, "was admitting we were wrong. That our formal education hadn't taught us the most important part, how to treat other human beings with dignity. But Mrs. Mary Johnson taught us that it's never too late to learn," concluded Emma, "and that true success lies in lifting others up, not in stepping on them." At the end of the event, Mary Johnson Williams gave a closing speech. "6 years ago, I thought my destiny was to be humiliated in silence. Today, I understand that my destiny is to give voice to those without one, dignity to those who have lost theirs, hope to those who have lost theirs. This center, this work, this transformation was only possible because I had a son who believed in me when I no longer believed in myself." She looked at Michael in the audience. "But most importantly, it was possible because I learned that a person's worth is not in the opinion others have of them, but in how they choose to live their life. I choose to live my life serving others, no longer in silence, no longer invisible, but with an active voice and the power to transform." The event ended with a symbolic moment. Mary Johnson Williams took her yellow gloves from her bag and handed them to a young cleaner in the audience. "Wear them with pride," said Mary Johnson Williams. "Every honest job has dignity, and you have the power to show that to the world." The young woman received the gloves with tears in her eyes, and the entire audience stood up to applaud. That night at home, Michael asked Mary Johnson Williams, "Mom, do you regret anything you went through?" Mary Johnson Williams thought for a few moments. "I don't regret the suffering because it taught me to have compassion. I don't regret the humiliations because they taught me to value dignity. I don't regret the difficulties because they made me strong." "And what is the most important thing you learned?" "I learned that true wealth isn't in the money we have, but in the difference we make in other people's lives. I learned that true power isn't in the authority we wield, but in how we use our influence to lift others up." Michael hugged her. "You've become the richest and most powerful person I know, Mom." "No, Michael. I just became the person I always was, but who was hidden under years of humiliation and low self-esteem." 2 years later, the Mary Johnson Center had become a national reference in supporting vulnerable workers. The model was replicated in other cities, always coordinated by women who had overcome similar situations. Mary Johnson Williams became a government consultant for policies combating moral harassment in the workplace. Her recommendations resulted in changes in legislation that better protect workers against systematic humiliation. Ashley Roberts, the only one of the 3 executives who never sought out Mary Johnson Williams, appeared in the newspapers involved in a corruption scandal at the company where she worked. She was fired and sued, facing years of legal battles. When Michael told Mary Johnson Williams about Ashley Roberts, she simply said, "Each person chooses their own path. Some learn from their mistakes, others insist on repeating them." On the eve of Mary Johnson Williams's 65th birthday, Michael surprised her with special news. "Mom, I received an interesting offer today." "What offer?" "A publisher wants to publish your story, a book about your journey of overcoming." "A book? Michael, who would want to read the story of a former cleaner?" "Millions of people, Mom, people going through similar situations, people who have lost hope, people who need to see that it's possible to overcome any adversity." Mary Johnson Williams became thoughtful. "And would I know how to write a book? You won't write it alone, you'll have help from professional writers. But the story, the important words, will come from your heart." "And what would the title of the book be?" Michael smiled. "From Yellow Gloves to Doctorate, a story of dignity and triumph." Mary Johnson Williams liked the title. "And part of the book's profits will go to the center to expand services for more women." "Then I accept." If my story can help other people not give up on their dreams, it's worth sharing. The book was released a year later and became an instant bestseller. Mary Johnson began receiving invitations to speak at universities, companies, and corporate events. At every talk, she brought her yellow gloves and told how they became a symbol of her journey. "These gloves," Mary Johnson would say, "represent all the jobs I've done, all the sacrifices I've made, all the dignity I've maintained even when others tried to take it away from me. They remind me of where I came from, but they also show me where I can go. Because it doesn't matter where we start, it matters how we choose to continue." 10 years after the humiliation in the building, Mary Johnson was preparing a speech for an international conference on labor rights when she received an unexpected visit. It was Mr. James, now retired but still active as a security consultant. "Miss Mary Johnson, I came to bring you something." He handed over a small box. "What is it, Mr. James?" "Open it and see." Inside the box was a small golden plaque with the following inscription: "Mary Johnson Williams, the woman who turned humiliation into humanity." "Where did you get this, Mr. James?" "The former building staff got together and ordered it. They wanted you to know that they never forgot the lesson you taught us." "What lesson?" "That a person is worth who they are, not what they do, and that treating someone with disrespect says more about the one who disrespects than the one who is disrespected." Mary Johnson kept the plaque in a special place in her home, next to her honorary doctorate degree. That evening, at dinner with Michael, she reflected on the 10-year journey. "You know, Michael, if someone had told me 10 years ago that I would be an honorary doctorate, a best-selling author, and the owner of a social support center, I would have thought they were crazy. And now, how do you feel?" "I feel grateful. Grateful for having gone through what I did, because it prepared me to help other people. Grateful for having a son who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Grateful for having discovered that it's never too late to start over." "And what's the next project, Mum?" "I'm thinking of creating a community college for working women, a place where they can study in their free time, developing new skills without losing their jobs." "You never stop dreaming, do you?" "Michael, when we stop dreaming, we stop living, and I still have many years of life ahead of me, many dreams to fulfill." End of story. So, what did you think of this story of triumph? Tell us in the comments if you know someone who went through a situation similar to Mary Johnson's. Your story can also inspire other people. Leave your like if the story touched your heart, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories like this one. Thank you for your company.